Hello and welcome back. So I've made two videos recently, one talking about what my top 50 cards in Vintage Cube are, one talking about my bottom 50 cards in Vintage Cube. And when I made the video talking about my bottom 50 cards in Vintage Cube, people were asking me what cards I would replace the bottom 50 with. And so this video I'm going through and just talking about cards I would like to add to Vintage Cube. I want to make one thing clear though, that just because a card is at the bottom of a cube, number one doesn't mean that's what should be cut. Because if you're always cutting the bottom and then just replacing the top, you get this endless nonsensical power creep that we see in Magic and Vintage Cube, and I don't think that's necessarily healthy for the format. So first, I want to say that the cards that I would cut are actually these top powerful cards. I would cut Minsc and Boo, Gut, Fury, Fourth Lingus, Broadside Bombardiers, like uh, Bullmasters, Palace Jailer. I would cut those cards before I cut the bottom 50. No, I would probably cut a lot of these too. But that's the direction that I would go. Cut Nadu, things like that, and just keep the or cutting all the cards that win the game on their own, and then moving more towards the synergy-driven cards. Like, I like Sneak Attack. I think it's fun, but in my opinion, it's really hard to justify building a deck around Sneak Attack when something like Minsc and Boo exists, because this is like a one card Sneak Attack. Or like the One Ring, that kind of thing. So that's how I would change the cube, and I've actually built my ideal version of a cube. It's the Powered Synergy Cube. So if you want to see kind of how I would build a cube with complete free reign, go check that out, because that's, I can only do so much to update the Vintage Cube itself. But my full custom cube, I had full free reign. So definitely go look at that. It's a ton of fun. There's videos of me playing the cube on Magic Online. I'll link that in the description too if you just want to see what the gameplay looks like. That being said, I think there is still a place to talk about cards that would add to the Magic Online Vintage Cube, but I just want to make the disclaimer that I don't think Wizards is going to cut things like Minsc and Boo from the cube, so we're kind of working with what we got here. So I just want to make sure this isn't how I would make the cube, but working in the constraints that we have, this is the kind of stuff that I would do. All right, glad we got that out of the way. So there's a couple cards. These categories are quite loose, and it's hard to rank them because, again, I can't change all of the cube. So I think a lot of this depends on how much support is added, because a lot of the cards, like I think Bazaar of Baghdad just should be in the cube. It's iconic. One of the biggest like players in the vintage format itself. But you can't just put Bazaar of Baghdad in the current cube because there's no support for it. So when I said love to see a card like this, I don't think you can just put it in the cube and hope it's going to be good. You really need to support it, add stuff to make it worthwhile, and like I said, you need to bring some things back, because if you're just going Bazaar of Baghdad as like a synergy piece and your opponent just has Oko, like, there's cards that just do so much on their own that it makes trying to build these synergistic decks not worth it. So you would need to spend some time. Maybe, Wizards doesn't cut all of these cards, but they pull back just a little bit to make something like Bazaar of Baghdad worthwhile. Things like that is probably necessary to make some of these cards work. And so I'm kind of rating those lower as like you would need more support. So we'll just start in with like things you can just kind of slot into the deck, into the cube as it is. These aren't in any particular order, they're just sorted by mana value. But the first one, Engineered Explosives, the fixing's so good, and it's just really good flexible removal. It's an artifact. I know people really love Candelabra. This is like the perfect example of an artifact that just does so much more than what Candelabra does, while being playable in virtually every single deck. It's interactive, it's repeatable, it's 0 mana, you can get off Trinket Mage, it's sweet. I love this card. Next up, this is part of a 2-card combo that I'm a big fan of, mostly because it's what I talk about a lot. The opportunity cost is so low. They basically, if they replace one of the red-green duels with this, it's not like you're giving up something by putting this in your deck. It's just a land. And then you play it with Punishing Fire, which says whenever opponent gains life, you can pay red to get it back. And so Grove of the Burn Willows gains your opponent life. Punishing Fire gets it back. I think that's great. If you basically replace it's the adventure creature that like does 2 damage and can be a 4/3. Just replace that with Punishing Fire. you're swapping a 2-mana shock for 2-mana shock. Grove of the Burn Willow's similar thing. But the nice thing is when you get both of these, suddenly you have this awesome archetype you can kind of build around. And the opportunity cost of each individual card is low, right? You're not unhappy to run a 2-mana shock in your deck when the upside is this. Rishadan Port, I think, is #1 slam dunk, just should be in the cube. This is like one of the best cards. Historically, I don't know why it's gone. It's insane. It's just really good, and it gives decks ways to handle unfair decks. It helps the lands archetype. This is the kind of thing I think we should be doing instead of like, Zuran Orb, Traveling Chocobo. Like, the lands deck is best when it's disruptive and it stops your opponent. And this is the perfect thing for that deck because I think this is like almost better than Strip Mine because you can basically change which land you're locking down. So turn 1, you lock down their red mana. Then they play another red source. And then they play like a blue source. And now you can just switch from locking down the red mana to their blue mana. So you don't have to like guess which mana to deny them because you can see what they have and deny it. Then maybe later they play Tolarian Academy. Well, now you lock down their Tolarian Academy. And then, you're like, okay, I have 4 mana. You can stop locking down their mana to play your 4-drop. It's just incredible. This card's so good. So definitely, if I could rate them, this is the #1 card I want in the cube by far. Force Spike is just good. I think the problem with the cube right now is if you're on the draw, you have very little agency because your opponent could go like Mox 1-drop or Mox land 2-drop. And almost all of the blue counter spells right now cost 2 mana. So if you're on the draw, you're just kind of stuck. You can play Daze, but then you're behind a land. Force Spike just kind of fills that gap so that you can interact, stop your opponent from doing things when you're behind. Especially, there's so many good 3s in the cube, and being able to counter a 3 when you're on the draw, or even on the play, like, this lets you, if you're just holding up Mana Leak every single turn, and your opponent goes like, I don't even know a good example here, like turn 1 drawing a Tree Speaker. They play that, and you're like, I have a counter spell, hold up Mana Leak. They level this up, don't play anything. Suddenly, you're so far behind. But if you're holding up just Force Spike, it's half as much mana, so you can play other things, and it's much more incidental. Not for everyone, and this is much worse than Manatize. Much worse than, well, it's similar to Daze. I just think it would be good. Tree Speaker is basically Soul Ring #2. I don't know why this card ever got cut. It was like the best green card. It's just Soul Ring. You play it, level it up, and you can tap for mana the same turn you level it up. So it's sort of a 0 mana. Like, you play this turn 1, turn 2 you level it up, play like a Phyrexian Revoker. Turn 3 you have 5 mana. It's great. Definitely put this in. Legion's Landing is just maybe a personal preference, but it's sweet that it's a 1/1 you can play turn 1, and then I don't actually care too much about the ability to make tokens, although it is nice. The thing I care about is this is basically a 1-mana 1/1 that becomes a land, and a lot of the best cards in the cube right now are 3 and 4 mana. So this card's kind of perfect as a way to let small, low-to-the-ground decks ramp themselves without having to play a super high land count. Because if you go like turn 1 Legion's Landing, turn 2 play the thing that creates 2 creatures, or something like that, you attack for 3. Now you can play your 4-drop on turn 3, and you're pretty far ahead. Maybe this gives you extra mana to like hold up Rishadan Port, things like that. So I don't know. This one I'm not in love with, but it's a great card and I think it's cool. Repeal is just a good role player. I'm not entirely sure why they cut it, but this is one of the best like blue interactive spells. 1 mana, kill a token, draw a card is huge. You can bounce a Mox. Like, this just does so much stuff. And then Spell Snare is kind of in the same boat as Force Spike, of just this card gives your deck the ability to interact and pull ahead when you're on the draw. Because right now the play-draw discrepancy in Vintage Cube is so high, so just more cards to help mitigate that problem. Engineered Explosives, I think, is another great one that can help play-draw disparity. But just being able to stop your opponent is huge. Now, I don't know if in the current build, like how many 2-drops there are for this to hit, but in general, if I could change the cube, lowering the curve a lot, I think would just help the cube feel better to play. It's not so clunky, and then this really starts to shine. Next, we just have a Cursed Marauder. Just good value removal disruption. When it enters, each player sacrifices a non-token creature. So there's a lot of tokens, but this kind of forces your opponent to sacrifice something good. I just think it's nice, and it's a creature in play. And I think having more enter the battlefield effects in green and black can be really nice with some things like Birthing Ritual. Good homage to Birthing Pod. Really awesome artwork, by the way. But this is just basically you at the beginning of your end step, look at the creature, look at the top 7 cards in your library. You can sacrifice a creature to get something that costs X or less from among them, where X is 1 plus the sacrifice creature's mana value. So like you play, I don't know, Duranga Tree, or you play Legion's Landing, you get a token. Next turn you can Birthing Ritual, sacrifice that token, get Duranga Tree Speaker, level it up, get some mana. Next turn you trade the Tree Speaker for Marauder, and so on. So this just gives you a ton of value. Seems sort of like a no-brainer. And then Moon Circuit Hacker is just, it's good for a lot of reasons. The first is it's just blue, kind of hit your opponent, draw a card, which is awesome. But then the other thing that's really good is it allows you to reuse enter the battlefield effects in the tempo style blue decks. Some things I've wanted to add: Spell Stutter Sprite. There are so many good 1 and 0 mana plays. Like, you don't need to have another fairy to make this good. This is, if you just read this as 2 mana, counter target spell that costs 0 or 1, that's basically all you need. If you get a Vendilion Click, great, you can counter a 2, but like, countering Lightning Bolt, Swords of Plowshares, Ancestral Recall, a Mox, Mana Crypt, Animate Dead, Reanimate, Entomb. Like, there's so many awesome things this card counters, and it's just a creature, right? You can attack them with it, you counter a spell, and then any ninja suddenly lets you counter another 1-drop. I think this card is really good. And good with Moon Circuit Hacker as well. And then, you know, this draws you a card, so it replaces itself. It's cheap. I think this is a great card. Revoker is one of my favorites. I don't know why it got cut. It's so good. It's a 2-mana Stone Rain. If you think about it like that, that's like mostly what it does. They have a Mox. You play the Revoker. Their Mox can't tap for mana. 2-mana Stone Rain. They have a Signet. Counters it. This deals with Planeswalkers. It's just such a good card. It's colorless. It goes in any deck. Yeah, you know, it doesn't always get to attack, but 2-mana Stone Rain that sometimes attacks is huge. So definitely would bring this card back. It just gives basically every deck some good way to interact with Planeswalkers. Like, you can name Minskin Boo, you can name Broadside Bombardiers, you can name Parallax Wave. There's just so many cards that this stops. And it's colorless. It's a great role player. We already talked about Punishing Fire. I think it would be worth trying the combo. The opportunity cost is quite low. Sinkhole may be controversial, but it's just a fun card. I don't think I've seen it in Vintage Cube, and let's try it out. I talked about Spell Stutter. Vendilion Click was like, I think this is maybe why I hate the Malcolm so much, because in my mind, Vendilion Click is just way better. The flying makes it way harder to block, although I think Malcolm has flying too. Maybe I'm just old school. Maybe Malcolm's just better than Vendilion Click, but I think the incidental disruption here is huge. Stopping your opponent, you know, if they have something busted in hand, you can take it before they can bring it down. Really cool card. Collected Company is interesting, but let's just take a look at the top 50 of Vintage Cube. Looking at creatures, right? Broadside Bombardiers, Gut Trukin Zealot, Psychic Frog, Tamio, Nadu, Lelia. There's so many good, you know, Death Greeter's Champion. There are so many strong creatures at the 3 mana value slot in Vintage Cube that I think Collected Company would be incredible. Like, just picture in your head, you cast Collected Company and you get Gut Broadside Bombardiers, or you get like Nadu plus Broadside Bombardiers. Like, there's so many broken 3s. I think this card would be huge. And people are talking about green being lacking. This is such a great way for green to pull ahead. Maybe you Collected Company into like Vendilion Click plus I think Collected Company into Vendilion Click plus Orcish Bowmasters, you know? Like, it's expensive, but it's instant speed, so it helps like a new archetype of like maybe green blue flash, where you have like these 3 in your deck, and then you flash out endurance or anything else like that. So I think it's worth trying. At 4 mana, it just adds to the range of insane 4 mana plays. It's card advantage, it's fun. It's also iconic, people like this card, so that's another reason to play it. Glorybringer, it's just the best. It's just the best. They're putting so many dragons in, this is the best out of all of them. Just put it in the cube. I don't think I need to say anything else. Next, so those are sort of the cards that I think you can just kind of put in the cube without a ton of work. Some of them might need a little bit of work, but like, I don't know, you could just put repeal in. Not a big deal. Next, we're talking about cards that will require some amount of refactoring of the cube. So you can't just put some of these cards in. You have to put all of these cards, maybe more cards than I have here. There's a lot of like discard enablers. Like a great example is Evora Insatiable Air. This card's pretty terrible in the Vintage Cube as it is now. But if you want to support like this discard theme, suddenly this card becomes quite good. Suddenly Tersa Light Shatter actually becomes pretty good because it's a discard enabler. So you just gotta like take this as like a complete package. Either you're putting all of this kind of support or you're putting none of it. The first one, Bazaar of Baghdad, already talked about. It's just an iconic card. It's sweet. It's the strongest effect probably in all of Magic when enabled. Put it in the cube. It's awesome. Cabal Therapy is sort of a similar vein. It's just a card that does something from your discard pile. That's really good, really disruptive. And you can also just play it as like cast it, name a card, don't know what it is, and then sacrifice something to turn this into a Thoughtseize. Which I think is honestly good enough because Thoughtseize is such a high value pick that I think this card's great. Molten Vortex, maybe a pet card for me, but if you're doing a discard theme like with Monument to Endurance, for example, this is such a good repeatable discard outlet that just picture this. You have a land in hand, you spend red, do 2 damage to the opponent, and you draw a card. Sick. Or you just play red and you do 5 damage to the opponent, 2 damage from this, 2 damage off Monument to Endurance. It's just an insane enabler for discard strategies. You can just play it as a control card, right? You just play this and start pinging down your opponent's cheap creatures early, snipe some planeswalkers. So I think I would play this with Life from the Loam in particular, because Loam plus Bazaar is like one of the better combos you can do in Cube, where you get lands in hand and then you draw and discard those lands to Bazaar, so you're just getting card advantage. You can dredge Loam off Bazaar to fill your graveyard to put things like Vengevine in there. So I think Loam Bazaar is good. If you're playing Loam, try out a Molten Vortex. It's kind of sick. Bloodghast, just kind of good value, good with Cabal Therapy, things like that. Survival, I want it to be good. There's a lot of things this card does. It can help you set up like reanimation. It can help you get creatures in hand for like sneak attack combos. It's historically been so under supported in Vintage Cube that everyone thinks it's bad, but like this card's bust. You just have to support it, and they never have. So I'm not saying this is enough to support it, but in my cube, it's amazing. So if you want to see like a well-supported survival, go check out my cube because it's so busted in that cube. Valdarian Bloodcaster is just cool. 2 mana, 2/1 flying. Whenever this or another creature dies, get a blood token. We don't care about the flip thing, but it's just another way to get good discard support and sacrifice. You know, if you Cabal Therapy your opponent, sacrificing a Bloodghast, you get a blood token. You can use the blood token to Madness and Angie's Ravager, that kind of thing. These are the kind of cards that you need to put in the cube if you want to support an archetype like this, like Bloodcaster, the Evoria. So I'm just giving an example of some of them, but you would need to add quite a few. This card's busted. I don't know what else to say. Discard your hand, draw 3. Empty your hand every turn, it's sick. Squeeze, just maybe a pet card, but it's so good with Bazaar of Baghdad. Just sort of repeatable value. Good with survival. You grab Squee, discard it. Next turn, you can just discard Squee to get another creature, and suddenly you just have green, you know, demonic tutor a creature every turn. So Vengevine is something that's actually really interesting to me because there's quite a few 4 mana green haste creatures in the cube already. I think the one that most upsets me is Questing Beast. Where is that? Right here. 4 mana, 4/4 haste. You know, it has a bunch of other text. That's fair. But like, this is people. Vengevine's amazing because you can play it for 0 mana out of your graveyard. But it's not that bad if you're just hard casting it either, because we have so many of these 4 mana haste things like Questing Beast. There's the one that has Trample. The other ones are all better, but the fact that this can just be free is so sick. So I would just cut one of the 4 mana. I would probably cut, what is it? I don't even think it's in here. The 4 mana artifact that makes tokens and then copies tokens, Asika's Chariot, I would just cut that for Venfine. Easy. Oxyvogonus, similar, just good from your graveyard. Hogak, similar, good from your graveyard. It helps the green decks too, because you can play like a bunch of small creatures and then make an 8/8. Love it. Okay, so now we're just getting into cards. Like, I think this is the biggest shakeup that I think Vintage Cube just should have, is like a good discard graveyard based archetype, because it's so prevalent in real Vintage that I think it just makes sense to support it. Like, real Vintage doesn't have as much Reanimator stuff, it's more of a Dredge style thing. You can totally make that deck. So anyway, I want that. Now we're just kind of getting into good cards that I like that would be a fun upgrade. Number 1 is probably just Goblin Welder. This card's sweet. If you're supporting a discard archetype, Goblin Welder suddenly slots in perfectly, because you can go like Bazaar of Baghdad, discard your Coveted Jewel, Goblin Welder, Coveted Jewel into play, go nuts. So I like that. Obviously, Synthesizer is just insane in that type of archetype. Same with Goblin Engineer. And then Refurbished Familiar is just a sweet card. I think right now the artifact strategy is sort of limited to blue, but artifacts are colorless. And so just branching it out into other colors, I think would really shake up the deck and make just a little bit more variety. Like, you can Mishra's Workshop out a Refurbished Familiar. That's cool. You can play this. You can get some sacrifice themes with Retrofitter Foundry, get some tokens in play, stack those to like Goblin Engineer, loop Refurbished Familiar. Seems sweet. And then this is maybe a deep cut from me, but Queen Ranger, Scrib Ranger, I'm just kind of putting these as one card. But it's return a forest to its owner's hand, untap target creature. Now, I think almost all of the value of this is just being able to return a land to your hand on command, even though this is only once each turn. But being able to bounce a land lets you play a low mana count without really risking of being screwed on mana. Even if you have 1 land in play, you have Queen Ranger. Turn 1, you play Ranger. Turn 2, you can tap the mana. Just Queen Ranger untap itself, and then play the land again. Suddenly you have 2 mana. So it's really good insurance against mana screw. And then it has some really great applications, like with Goblin Welder. Maybe you double Goblin Welder in 1 turn. Suddenly you're like so far ahead. Even just like with a mana elf, this can basically end up being sort of +2 mana, right? If you have, let's say, a Draga Tree Speaker, where's that card? Draga Tree Speaker Queen Ranger can just generate insane amounts of mana. And then there's some other like good value cards that tap, like I think Grim Lavamancer is insane, Priest of Forgotten Gods. So if you're putting this kind of card in there, again, you would need to add some more tap effects to make it better, but there's already quite a few in the cube. And I think just literally just return a land to your hand, no questions asked, is insane. This giving something vigilance is awesome. This being able to double tap something like Goblin Welder is like, that's just bonus, but it's a really nice bonus. And like, imagine Orcish Lumberjack, Queen Ranger. How much mana is that? Turn 1, Orcish Lumberjack. Turn 2, land Queen Ranger. You're going to kill both of your lands for 6 mana. You'll have 7 mana on turn 2. That's pretty strong for, 2 1-drops. So there's a lot of sick plays that something like this can do. I think it's worth trying, supporting, because it's just so strong and underlooked. Scrib Ranger is basically the exact same card, but it has a little bit more utility in other archetypes because it's got like flash flying, protection from blue. So if you wanted something more flexible and slightly less explosive, this could work, especially if you wanted to support a fairies theme. I don't know. It could be good. I think this card is better overall. Next, these are just some miscellaneous cards that are good. I think Knight of Autumn is better than Kasali Pride Mage, especially if you're doing something like Birthing Pod, Birthing Ritual. It's just a sweet card because it has utility outside of that. It's a 3-mana 4/3, that kind of thing. Krosan Verge. I think, in my mind, this is the kind of thing the lands deck wants to be doing. Because this is basically a land. The opportunity cost is very low. It does enter tapped, but that's fine. But for 2 mana and tapping it, you get to search for forest and a plains and put it into play. So this is a land that just accelerates you up 1 mana. So you play this turn 2. Turn 3 you crack it, and then turn 4 you have 5 mana now. And the cost to do that is just 1 land. So I would check this out. It is slow. So it enters tapped, and then the lands it gets enters tapped. So it's sort of a pretty slow ramp, but it's good ramp. It's good fixing. I would check it out. I'm a Grim Lavamancer believer. The card that I would cut straight away is Kellen. Cut Kellen, bring in Grim Lavamancer. This card's sick. I know a lot of people have fallen off of it, but it's so good. And then Chandra, this Chandra is 3 mana instead of 4. And she just lets you Snapcaster Mage stuff back. This can make a burn deck alive. Imagine in my cube, you do this, you like Smallpox. And you can Smallpox again. You can Lightning Bolts. Like there's so many things this can get back. And it just sits in play, makes 1/1 creatures. You can Skull Clamp them or whatever. It's good. Valakut Exploration again is another card that... So the problem I have with all of the current land enablers in Vintage Cube is they're very win more, where like Mightform Harmonizer, you have to have a 4-mana creature in play, then you have to play a land, and then you have to have another creature in play that you're attacking with profitably in that turn to double their power. Like, that's so many things that have to go right just to get some value off your 4-mana card. But with something like Valakut Exploration, whenever land enters, X of the top card in your library, you can play it. With Fast Bond, you can just kind of play through your deck with this. This draws you into action, and if you don't play the thing, it does damage to your opponent. So it's like a clock, card value, card advantage. It's pretty sick. They had Brightglass Gearhulk in the cube for, I think, 1 season. It was awesome every time I played it. It was I think the only card I've seen in cube that I look at it and I go, I want to play Selesnya. Because the upside is so high. You get 2 things with mana value 1 or less. Maybe you grab Black Lotus and an Ocelot Pride, right? There's so many good things this can tutor. This card's sick. I loved it. Next is cards that are probably just my pet cards, but I think they're sweet. Number 1, Black Braids. Anyone who's watched my content for a long time knows I'm obsessed with this card. And they finally added like City of Traders, Ancient Tomb, things that can tutor this up faster. There are very few cards in Magic that can win a game more decisively than Black Braids. She's really play draw dependent, and I think given how strong, recently printed cards are, she has gotten worse. But she was like the best card in Cube maybe 6 years ago. Like she was so good. Because you just go like turn 1, Mox Dark Ritual Braids. Let's say you're on the draw. Your opponent sacrifices their only land. And then you, on your turn, sacrifice a land, play a 2-drop, and now they're basically losing something every single turn, and you can just win the game where they have no permanence. Maybe she's bad now, but I love her, so bring her back. Similar vein, Smallpox. This is just insane. You don't need all these combos to like, what's the land you sacrifice it to get like a plains in play? You don't need that. This is just... It's symmetric, but you deny your opponent resources at a time where you can afford to do that. Maybe you have a Mox or a Signet or a Talisman, and so you can Smallpox away your lands because you have something else to play. Maybe you Smallpox when they have a creature you don't. It's just really good if you can time it right. Priest of Forgotten Gods, you would have to add some kind of like sacrifice support, like Bloodghast and things, but like that card goes pretty hard with Quarian Ranger. Good with Chandra. It's just sweet. So I don't know. That one would need support. Birthing Pod, I just love, but it's crazy how expensive and clunky this is compared to something like the Birthing Ritual we showed up here. I personally would add both because Pod is just fun, but I could see this not being good enough for Cube. And then just some more Ninja support. I think Ninja the Deep Hours is sweet, but you would have to add some more turn 1 enablers so you can attack in Ninjutsu. And then Wrinkle's just awesome. I think kind of a pet card, but a fun one. The problem is it's a 4-drop, right? But I think in my ideal world, this card is so much more fun than like a Shieldred the Apocalypse. So if I could completely change anything, I would cut Shieldred because this it just does so much stuff. It just kills them, it gains you life, it makes it hard for them to draw. So I would probably cut something like Shieldred for Rankle because this requires a little bit more play. But, this is obviously worse, so do with that what you will. And then these are some deep cuts. Stifle. Let's talk about it. Um, in my opinion, blue is like one of the worst colors in the cube right now. And these sort of tempo plays would really help that get better, right? Now you're not having to wait until turn 2 to mana leak them because you have Spell Snare, you have Repeal, you have Force Spike, you have Moon Circuit Hacker to return enter the battlefield effects. Maybe you're bouncing a Cursed Marauder, and then you make them sacrifice again, that kind of thing. Stifle goes one step further and gives blue access to mana resource denial, which is one thing that it really is lacking, because you can stifle a fetch land. And they just added a whole another cycle of fetch lands to the cube, so getting to this to work is much more likely than it is before. I have historically been against adding this card into cube, specifically because it's mostly, at the time, was a sideboard card against Storm. Like, if you go through all the trouble that tendrils your opponent, and they just stifle it, there's basically nothing you can do. I'm advocating for cutting tendrils out of the cube because I think if they're not going to support Storm, just remove it from the cube. If you're going to support Storm, support it, and then don't run Stifle. But I think if you are cutting tendrils, brain freeze, all that stuff from the cube, Stifle becomes kind of sick. It stops a lot of these interesting triggers. Like you can stifle a Priest of Forgotten Gods, Planeswalker Ultimate, stifling a Croson Verge would be kind of nuts. You can stifle a Wasteland. If they Wasteland you stifle it, that's huge. So it's just a really good tempo play that has a lot of other utility, but I would only put this in the cube if you cut Storm, because it just feels so bad to tendrils and just have this stop that. Tomb of Arami is a really interesting deep cut. I would only put this in. I know a lot of people love like the Zurin Orb type stuff. The problem I have with Zurin Orb is it just takes up a deck slot, and it's pretty like bad. But if you want to Zurin Orb plus Titania, I think something like this is kind of better because you can just on your land sacrifice all your lands, and then you're not like it doesn't cost you a deck slot to put it in. The problem with this is it costs you like a cube slot. But I think Tomb of Arami, for example, has a lot more utility than something like Urborg. And they're running Urborg. So like if you wanted to play a utility land, just cut Urborg, run Tomb of Arami. They're both pretty marginal. And then Terrain Generator, maybe just a pet card, but I just think if you want to build a lands archetype, just put lands in there for the archetype instead of creatures. Like this is a land that gives you acceleration, and that's sweet. It's colorless, so the opportunity cost is just, I put this in my deck. But suddenly, turn 2, you hold up Counterspell, your opponent doesn't do anything. You just put a land into play. Now you have 4 mana on turn 3. You can slam Jace, or you can go 2-drop, hold up Counterspell again. So I think this type of thing is the better direction to go for lands instead of like the Might Form Harmonizers of the world. But that could just be me. Okay, that was a lot of talking about the cards, but I think there's a lot to discuss here. Because the cube, in my mind, is in a rough place, although I will say the gameplay has been good. I think it's just, it needs a lot of work. So that's the card that I would add to Vintage Cube. There's probably a ton that I've missed, and I just want to reiterate again, like, I'm not saying just put Goblin Welder in the current Vintage Cube, because it would be pretty bad. What I'm saying is put Goblin Welder, add supporting cards to the current Vintage Cube, then maybe it gets interesting. The thing that I would say is a lot of these strategies kind of fall behind because of just how strong the recently printed cards are. Like, you can go through all this trouble to get your value, but when you can just play Gut and make an army for like 3 mana just attacking, it makes it hard to justify going through all these hoops to like Quirion Ranger your Goblin Welder and that kind of thing. Which is why in the Synergy Cube, if you look through, I cut literally all of these 1-card win conditions. The last one left is Titania, which to my dismay, I think has to go. I'm going to replace this with Baloth Prime most likely. But other than that, it's like you have to build your own win conditions. And that makes it so much more inviting to go for these combos when your opponent isn't just spending 3 mana to end the game. Hey, I'm sorry for the short interruption, but I just wanted to take the time to mention that I spent about 3 years designing my ideal card game, which is Algomancy. So if you like the way that I play the game, talk about the game, or view synergies, and you think that type of gameplay is something you could be interested in, maybe check out Algomancy. It solves the problem of first player advantage, solves the problem of Mana Screw and Flood, and there's no expensive cards. It's just a self-contained cube-like experience. You can cube draft with your friends. The other thing that it does really cool is you can cube draft 1v1. You don't need to get up to 8 people, and you can actually draft live in the game as well. So it's a really, really fun game that's based on just strategy instead of like getting lucky, hoping to draw the right cards. It really allows you to make cool plays and win on those cool and interesting plays and synergies. So if you're interested at all, go to algomancy.io, give it a check. Otherwise, just keep enjoying the videos.